Welcome to New York Got Game.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of New York Got Game. So much to get into this week because it's been quite a busy week in the world of New York basketball. The Knicks, they're now looking for a new head coach. We're going to get into that. The Liberty, they just keep on winning. So much to get into. We're going to cover both teams on this episode. We're going to talk a little Knicks, talk a little Liberty. So let's get right to it.
The Knicks are heating up.
The Tom Thibodeau era in New York is officially over. Now the search begins for the next leader of the Knicks after taking the franchise to his first Eastern Conference Finals in over 2 decades. Now look, the bar, it's been raised. The pressure is on to find a coach who can take this team to the next level. So the big question here is who should be on the short list? And this week, I'm joined by New York Got Game on the show by Knicks Film School contributor Shawn Hardie. Shawn is here with me now. Shawn, I feel like we're going to have some names that people expect, some that may surprise some people as well, too. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Happy Saturday to you. And, you know, it's been a tumultuous week in Knicks world. Some people, including myself, wanted the events of Tuesday to happen. We just didn't think it would happen on Tuesday or this summer, to be clear. So, but, you know, as I said on Twitter, you know, you cannot tell the story of the Knickerbocker Revolution without Tom Thibodeau. So he will always be appreciated for what he did for his franchise and how he got us up out of the mud to where we are now, 6 wins away from a championship. But as they say, maybe those who can take you here may not be the ones to take you there.
Sometimes that is the case, right? And sometimes you gotta make some changes, and we'll see here. But as I said to people at the top, Shawn and I, we've put together our list of candidates. We have 5 each, right? And it's going to be about who we think are the most intriguing / best fits here for the Knicks. So we have our list here. Shawn, I want to look at your list because you have Terry Stotts, Johnny Bryant, Dave Joerger, James Borrego, and Sam Cassell. Very interesting list there for you. Now, we do have some overlap here, folks, because I also had Johnny Bryant on my list. I also have James Borrego on my list to go along with Mike Brown, Chris Quinn, and Dave Bliss. So, Shawn, I'm going to ask you this. How do you want to start this conversation? Do we want to go with the guys that we both had and discuss why we think those guys could be good fits, or do you want to take maybe one of the guys that we differed on here, some different guys? How do you want to start? We can go whatever way you want to do. Let's
start with the guys that we both have in commmen.
Okay.
Because I want to see if we both like these guys for the same reasons.
Okay. All right. So let's start with the commonalities here. And Johnny Bryant, right? Johnny Bryant's one that we have here, and obviously his name has come up a lot. He was on Tom Thibodeau's staff a couple of years ago. He was coaching this past year with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So for me, Shawn, why I think he'd be a good candidate is not just the familiarity. I think people in the Knicks do like him. They advocated for him to be on Tom Thibodeau's staff. But I just think he has a relationship with the players, has work in player development, is something I think the organization needs. He's a younger mind, which is something I also think the organization needs. And I'm curious as to how you feel about that. And he could bring some fresh ideas while having familiarity with the organization, but just bringing something that's a little bit new. So I think Johnny Bryant could be an interesting candidate. Now, the one thing I will say that is a little bit concerning to me is, okay, with the inexperience, although I'm always someone who says you can't get experience without, actually getting it.
Yeah.
My concern is how does he then handle being in the big market here? And if they have a 3-game loser streak in December, how does Johnny Bryant handle that? That's going to be the very interesting thing for me. But I do like him as a head coaching candidate. Do I know how good Johnny Bryant's going to be? I have no idea. None of us know. We can say this for any of these coaches. But I do think he could be intriguing because of the familiarity with the organization, but also bringing a little bit of a fresh perspective. What's your reasons for liking Johnny Bryant, and why was he on your list?
So we share a lot of the same reasons. Obviously, the familiarity is key. He's been here before. He's been in the building. He knows the players. That it's been circling all over social media, that video he's done talking about offensive philosophy and spacing and, ball movement and what have you. And, a lot of people who have been clamoring for Johnny Bryant think like, hey, he will help improve our offense, because that is one of the issues where the Knicks in the calendar year 2025 surely lacked. But the other thing is that it's not that he was here under Tom Thibodeau. And because he was here under Tom Thibodeau, he had a first-hand look into what worked and what didn't. And he was probably privy to all the conversations. Like, it's come out now. We've seen reporting in The Athletic. We saw reporting from other reputable sources that, the front office made suggestions time and time again. And Tom Thibodeau said no. Tom Thibodeau wouldn't meet with his head coaches, would have listened to them. He knew what worked. So if anybody knows what works and what didn't from a first-hand perspective, it's him. And that knowledge is pretty valuable. So if he's hired as head coach, day one is going to be all right. I know he basically had for 3 years was like, man, if I were the coach, I would have done this. And now he gets a chance to do so.
That's interesting to me, but I think this is going to be interesting with all the candidates, right, Shawn? In the fact that I'm thinking the word malleable. I think that's the word you're looking for, right? The adaptability, which is one of the things, the criticisms of Tom Thibodeau. Will he be adaptable? I have a feeling the Knicks, this is high on their priority list. I think you make a good point as somebody in him he's been there. He got a chance to see what doesn't work. Maybe that was a valuable experience for him as an assistant coach to say, okay, when I am a head coach, wherever it may be, if it's here in New York, someplace else, I need to be a little bit more adaptable, right? Because it's a great point. Sometimes you learn a lot from knowing what not to do as much as you can learn from somebody telling you what there is to do. Do you have any concerns about his inexperience? And I guess we'll get into this more as we talk about other guys, but do you have any concerns or when it comes to this? Because I think you and I, with our list, is very interesting between the experience and inexperience. Do you think experience is necessary for the person who's going to be the next head coach of the New York Knicks?
I don't know if it's necessary, but it's something I'll prefer. And the reason why, and for the record, I only have two guys between him and Sam Cassell who are first-year coaches. If it were up to me, I'd want someone with experience because I believe that the most underrated part of coaching is relationships with players, man management, as they say in Europe. Being able to connect and get through to the players, right? And getting the players to buy into what you're trying to do. And it may be easy for players to overrule, overlook, ignore, dismiss the rookie head coach as opposed to someone who's been a coach for years who can say like, no, I've done this before. The example I think about a lot is Joe Mazzulla in Boston, who obviously, he got the job due to unforeseen circumstances of what happened with Ime Udoka. But Brad Stevens really, really believed that Joe Mazzulla could do the job and was willing to take the chance. And his first year was a lot of ups and downs. Bill Simmons' father referred to him as second row Joe because he's like, how did the second row assistant guy become the head coach? But he took his lumps, and then year two they were champions. And listen, in year two they were champions. Now, if this team, the concern that I would have is that if this team, let's say this team goes out in round 2 next year, or even goes on to ECF, is the pressure going to be too much for him to bear? Again, as a rookie head coach in the biggest market in the country. Now, Boston is not New York, but Boston is still Boston, and that's a tough place to coach. And Joe Mazzulla had the ability to see through it, so hopefully Johnny Bryant would. But that's absolutely something that's necessary, and that's where experience matters because you'll know how to deal with the media, you know how to deal with the players, you'll know how to tune out the noise and figure out what works and what doesn't.
No, it can matter for sure. It's going to be very interesting to see when we start finding a little bit more of the short list. We're giving our list here, but when we find a little bit more of what the short list is for the New York Knicks, if they have one, how that's going to play out. Now, another guy that we have in common, James Borrego, he has some experience.
Yes, he does.
Man, 47 years old. He coached for Charlotte a couple years ago. Gave them the most wins they had had since 2016 with 43 wins. And I was stunned when the Hornets got rid of James Borrego. Thought he was a good coach, coached under Pop in San Antonio. So he's part of that's a coaching tree I like. If you come from coaching under Pop, I generally, not everybody, but generally, I think that has worked out pretty well. I value people who can come from good cultures in terms of the coaching. I think that matters a lot. I think James Borrego is one of those guys. He did have some looks for the Lakers job, the Cleveland job last year. Good coach. I think solid overall mind on both sides of the ball. I think has the experience, could bring some fresh ideas. I like him as a candidate. Not seeing him mentioned everywhere, Shawn, but I like him as a candidate, and I liked when I saw your list and said, okay, Shawn brought him up too. Why do you like him? And I think he's a guy that knows he got a raw deal in Charlotte, and I think you'd be motivated coming here to New York, getting a second chance to try to get this team over the top. What do you say?
So, like you said, comes from the San Antonio Spurs system. So, obviously, learned under a legend, Greg Popovich. And to your point, like he absolutely got a raw deal in Charlotte. Doing my research on him, when his best two players were healthy, especially his last three seasons, and those being LaMelo Ball and he who shall not be named. I just tell you his name. He has the same last name as Mikal Bridges. I'll just say that. I don't like to mention his name because he likes to get handsy with his baby mama. But
understood.
When he had those two players, there basically were 39-40 wins. They were a 10 seed. To the fact that in the 2020-2021 season, they were fourth in the East. They were fourth in the East until LaMelo Ball got hurt. So for me, I think this is someone who, again, got a raw deal in Charlotte. His second year, when his best players, 1 year his leading scorer was Devontae Graham, another year was Terry Rozier. It's like, and I know people like to say like LaMelo Ball is him or whatever. It's like, well, LaMelo Ball is the reason why he's the best player on a 40-win team every year or below. LaMelo Ball and the other guy aren't exactly like a 1-2 championship punch. So him taking this job, clearly he'd have way more talent he had in Charlotte. And again, that San Antonio pedigree of like, okay, we are going to figure out how to put our players in the best positions to succeed. Because if you look at those Greg Popovich teams from the 90s, did not play the Greg Popovich teams of the 2000s and of the 2010s. So and again, I keep going back to the fact that like it's almost like finding a diamond in the rough. Like Charlotte wasn't smart enough to realize they had a good coach. Now listen, again, I don't know if he will be great here. He could be terrible. Who knows? But for the people who have coached already, I think that he's someone I would take a strong look at.
Yeah, I would too. I like a lot of what you said. Yeah, I think he got a raw deal. I think that he could do well here and could be very motivated. I like that. We talk about this a lot for players, Shawn, but for coaches, being motivated as well, wanting to come back and have something to prove after you've been doubted or got a raw deal. I think that could benefit the Knicks. I think the Knicks need somebody that is a little hungry for the opportunity, and you could talk about that with a Johnny Bryant as well too, and there'll be some other guys we talk about. But in terms of him, I think he could be really hungry for that. So James Borrego, I think we both agree. That's a name you should watch. Maybe it's not the sexiest name. I understand that, but I think it's definitely a name we could watch here with the Knicks in terms of their coaching next move and who they decide to hire. Now, Shawn, where do you want to go with this? Because you have some interesting names. We both then have three different guys that we didn't pick. So you've got another first-time coach, and you also have some other veterans. Where do you want to go next in terms of your picks?
So let's go to the other first-time coach, in Sam Cassell. I forget. Do you have another first-timer on your list?
I do. I have Chris Quinn on my list. Actually, two. I have another two first-timers: Chris Quinn and Dave Bliss. We can stick with the first-timers then. So Sam Cassell. Yeah,
Sam Cassell. So again, my concern about first-timers is that will you be able to command the locker room and command the respect of the players? I don't believe that will be a problem with Sam Cassell, who's been in the NBA since 1994. Obviously, he was on those championship teams with the Rockets. But since then, he's put in the work. He's been an assistant. He's been assistant in Washington, the Clippers, the Sixers, currently with the Celtics, where he won a championship under Joe Mazzulla. He's put in the time as an assistant. He's paid his dues. He will command respect of the locker room because, again, he's a two-time NBA champion. If there's any other first-time coach I would consider, it would be him. Again, do we know how much he wants? Do we know his philosophy? Do we know if he leans offensively or defensively? Not necessarily sure about that. And if you're gonna go for a first time guy, and if it's not gonna be Johnny Bryant, the only other person I personally would consider is Sam Cassell.
I like it. I like what you're. Again, this also ties into Sam Cassell's a guy who's coached in some really good culture situations. He's been around some really good guys in terms of head coaches that you should feel good. He's been under Ty Lue, he's been under Doc Rivers. So you really like the people he's been in the culture. And I do think he's coached a long time. I've always been shocked that he hasn't gotten more opportunities. That's been a little bit more shocking to me. But no, I like that you had him on the list. I haven't seen him on a lot of people's short list. I like you had him on the list. I think you're right. Out of the first-time head coaches, because of the amount of experience he's had doing it as a lead assistant and some of the guys he's been under, I do think he'd be ready for an opportunity there. So my other first-time coach, I have two more, but I'm going to go here to Chris Quinn, and I'm curious to hear what you think about it. Chris Quinn, a lead assistant for the Miami Heat. He's been with that organization for quite some time. I believe he's been there for a decade. Now he's been there for 10 years with the Miami Heat. Look, I know Knicks fans, you hate the Heat. I get it. I understand all the history there. I get it. But you got to respect, I know Heat culture gets talked about probably a little bit too much, right? Like I think Heat culture sometimes is doing too much. But I do think there is a good culture and in terms of coaching. And I do think that someone who's been under Spoelstra, values defense, which, the Knicks could get some improvement in that. I'm not sure you could make Karl-Anthony Towns a better defender, but maybe in terms of schemes and stuff. Chris Quinn has been in that system for quite some time, as I said, almost a decade. He's learned under Spoelstra. This is another one where I'm going to trust the culture, the time that he's been around. If you're going to go with a first-year guy, I guess that's the thing for me, where I think align. You got to give me somebody from a proven culture, proven head coach that they've worked under. I'm going to be honest here. I don't know if Chris Quinn is going to be a good coach. I don't know if he'll be better than Johnny Bryant. I have no idea if he'll be better than Sam Cassell. I have no idea about that whatsoever. But if I'm going to look at his culture and where he comes from and then take that in terms of interviewing and look at how he could align with where the Knicks need to go, I think he's not a bad guy to look at. Now, if you ask me, Shawn, I would probably rather go with Johnny Bryant over him because of the reasons you mentioned before about how he sat in the organization. He saw what Tom Thibodeau did with some members of this group and understands maybe what it needs to take better. So it's almost like you're getting somebody who's been part of some other good cultures but also has been in yours and maybe knows how to push it forward. But what do you think about Chris Quinn?
So the fact that he coached the fact that he was assistant in Miami does not bother me. I will take if I think you're good enough, I don't care if you coach for hell. I don't care if you coach for Satan. It doesn't matter to me. My concern about Chris Quinn is, and it also relates to it more relates to players that leave the Heat, because the Heat, at least me and Andrew Claudio make the joke all the time. The Heat will go to Publix, find a cashier, teach him how to shoot, teach him defense, and how to shoot 40% from three, and then when he leaves the Heat, he turns back into a Publix cashier. So, the only guy that's one of the Heat role players that left the Heat and basically have thrived has been Max Strus. So the concern is can Chris Quinn take what he's learned and does it what happened? The way they go about things in Miami. Can you take that and apply somewhere else? And then I think about who else has left Eric Spoelstra and became a coach? And who was the last? And let me ask you a question, Dexter.
Sure.
Who was the last person that coached under Eric Spoelstra that was hired by the New York Knicks?
Wow, let me think about that. Oh, that's not. I realized I didn't have to go that far. I thought I had to go further, and I was like, oh, David Fizdale.
David Fizdale. Now, what I will here,
Did you like the David Fizdale hire though?
I liked at the time.
So did I.
And looking back on it now, David Fizdale was hired to coach a team that he was never supposed to coach a team as bad as was. Like he never got to coach Kristaps Porzingis. I think the feeling was this team will tread water, and then in the summer 2019 we'll get the big fish and we'll go from there. So he's not the guy that should have. I'm pretty sure if I knew that Kristaps was going to tear his ACL and the team would be that bad, I wouldn't have hired him. And that 1920 team, no. So that is my concern. Does Heat culture translate? I think the other coach that got it, like Juwan Howard was assistant with the Heat. He went to the University of Michigan, mixed results there.
Yeah.
So I listen. He clearly has been the hot assistant. I've kind of stayed away from him for the simple fact that, again, one, your first time head coach, and two, like, there's no, I'm skeptical about that because, again, it's almost similar to why Bill Belichick's assistants don't translate to other coaching spots, because like what we do here may not necessarily work in other places.
That's interesting and it's an interesting contrast, right, between the Heat, their culture and their coaches, and you make a good point about the role players too, and then the Spurs, who their coaching tree has been much more successful. You've seen it, whether it's Becky Hammon, whether it's Ime Udoka. I mean, Mike Budenholzer, no matter what you feel about him, he got a championship, right?
Yes.
He has won. So we've seen several coaches do this from the Spurs coaching tree and be very successful. So that's really interesting. I understand the concerns with Chris Quinn. I just wonder, maybe Chris Quinn knows exactly what you're talking about, Shawn, and he's like, I'm the one to try to break this trend. Maybe he's motivated to try to break the trend, so he can prove you wrong. Chris Quinn might want to prove you wrong. I don't know that. Okay, so that's another guy for me. You had your first year. Who's the next guy you want to talk about on your list?
The next guy I want to talk about on my list is. Actually, I'll save him for last. Let's go to Dave Joerger. Okay. So for Dave Joerger, again, if my preference would be someone who's coached before. So I looked at all the assistant coaches, and listen, I'm very skeptical of like certain retreads. Like, for example, like I don't want any parts of Mike Budenholzer. I don't want Mike. We'll get to Mike Brown. I'm not a Mike Brown fan.
Ooh, let me get to him. Okay.
And who's the other name? Frank Vogel's thrown around. Like I don't. So I think there's a lot of like and Michael Malone is Tibbs with a toothpick. So but there's a lot of being thrown around like you need a guy that's won a ring, and I'm like, well, not every coach is like. Look at all the coaches who are available who've won championships, and then like who you're picking. Like you're picking Budenholzer or whatever. Dave Joerger, I looked at because he's coached before, head coach in two places, Memphis and Sacramento. Had an almost 600 winning percentage in Memphis over 3 seasons. He was well under 500 in Sacramento in his 2 seasons there, but I won't hold that against him because guess what? It's Sacramento. But what stood out to me was that like he didn't lose his. So the gift and the curse of Dave Joerger is like he didn't lose his job because he was bad. Because in 3 seasons there, 50 wins, 55 wins, 42 wins. The concern is that sometimes he doesn't necessarily get along with management. And that's kind of what happened in Memphis, which is why I jumped into Sacramento. And obviously I want to win Sacramento, but again, it's Sacramento. But he made the playoffs all 3. He made the playoffs all 3 years. Had a positive net rating in the first 2 years. And if you go back and look at those Memphis teams, because that's 2014, 15, and 16, that was the grit. That was the last remnants of the grit and grind era. So that's Tony Allen, Zach Randolph, Mike Conley. So. Not like, listen, I like Zach Randolph, I like Mike Conley, but it's not like exactly murderer's row when it comes to talent. And he was able to make it work again. Like, and they had the Grizzlies. This is ironic. The Grizzlies they were up 2-1 on the Warriors in 2015, and I actually picked the Grizzlies to win the title that year, or at least beat the Warriors because I said the size that they have, they won't be able to deal with. And then Steve Kerr said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have Andrew Bogut guard Tony Allen because Tony Allen's not going to shoot, which really means I'm not going to guard Tony Allen. And that completely flipped the series. And I think that's relevant here because if Dave Joerger would be the head coach, one of the things you have to deal with is how do I deal with this guy over here that doesn't shoot in Josh Hart? And he will remember what he had to deal with playing because Tony Allen was like all NBA first team defense, all defense NBA first team in Memphis. So he had much more of a call to stay on the court than Josh Hart. And listen, Josh Hart is amazing. Please don't send for me Josh Hart hive, but I in terms of like I think he'll garner the respect of the players. I think he'll be flexible. He's dealt with similar situations like this before. So in terms of like retreads, he's like the last one I'd consider.
So when I saw him on your list, I was a little surprised because you haven't seen his name come up in quite some time. But he's a good coach. He's a really good coach. He's a coach I liked. He got a raw deal in Sacramento, but everybody gets a raw deal in Sacramento.
Yes.
Which is going to lead me to the next coach I'm going to talk about, which is one of, or the only retread I really have on here, and I have concerns about retreads similar to you. But to your points on Dave Joerger, I think that's an excellent one about him learning from that 2015 series and how Bogut basically did not guard Tony Allen. I wonder what Dave Joerger has learned from that and what he would do with someone like Josh Hart, who actually is more skilled offensively than Tony Allen, despite the fact he's not as willing to shoot. I agree with you. But I wonder what he would have learned from that and how he would apply that, especially he's sat around some time and he's worked some different places. I wonder what he's learned. I feel like, Shawn, he's the kind of retread you should want, someone who's also stepped away a little bit from the head coaching position and had some success, but still could be motivated to push forward as well, too. So I liked his name because I always thought he was a good coach. And that'll lead me to the one retread that I have on my list, and I kind of am really staying away from the retreads. Although the last person that I know you will talk about, I thought strongly and I debated in putting in this spot as well, too. But I'm going to talk about Mike Brown. Mike Brown, who I think is a good coach. He has won everywhere that he has been. I think he's had a couple of raw deals. First in Los Angeles, and then obviously recently in Sacramento. Sacramento, he's turned that franchise around. He got him back. He had the offense playing really well, which impressed me because he was known as a defensive coach.
Yes.
If the Knicks, and this is the key thing, this is the tough thing I think about us having this conversation, Shawn, in terms of talking about coaches. We still don't know how soon the Knicks want to make this move in terms of hiring a coach. We don't know if that coach is going to have input in what the roster is going to look like, and we have no idea what the roster is still going to look like next year. Are the Knicks going to make any moves? Now, if the roster mostly stays the same, and you're still going to have Jalen Brunson, you're still going to have Karl-Anthony Towns, your two All-NBA players who are also your weakest defenders, and it is a problem playing them both at the same time. So the school of thought, I think I've heard you talk about this too, is that if you're going to have that roster, what you want to do is try to maximize the offense as best as you can, right?
Yes.
We saw Mike Brown do that with Sacramento. Sacramento did not have any good defensive teams, but he sure maximized that offense and had them playing with a lot of pace, a lot of variety. I think one of the things the Knicks really need, and this kind of goes into all my coaching candidates, I think for yours too, is the offense needs to be modernized. They need to move into the 21st century. It's got to look a little bit different. I think Mike Brown could do that. He also has a defensive pedigree. He is also a coach from the Greg Popovich school. So there's some values with him. I know you're not crazy about him. I think I will critique myself on this and say that there could be a school of thought that Mike Brown is somebody that is a floor raiser and not necessarily a ceiling raiser. I'm a little bit on the fence with him on that because I think he's gotten some raw deals and we haven't seen him be able to raise some ceilings. This would probably be one of the more talented rosters he'd get to coach, maybe outside his first year with the Lakers. But I like to see what he can do. You have trepidation around Coach Mike Brown. Why are you out on Mike Brown as being a good candidate for the Knicks?
So, honestly, listening to you, and I actually looked up a couple things while we were talking, you've actually kind of like convinced me a little bit because to your point, see, I wanted more. I believe the Knicks coach should be more offensive minded, and I generally like more. I generally choose an offensive minded coach over a defensive minded coach because offensive minded coaches don't restrict, they don't stifle, whereas defensive coaches, it's in their nature. You have to restrict, you have to stifle because you have to stop the other team. I didn't realize how good they were off like their offensive rating that Sacramento had while he was there. And to me, that tells me that's a team that's like, okay, I'm not going to stifle your offensive flow. I'm going to see if I can put you in install some defensive principles that can help us. And honestly, he'd have far better defensive talent here in terms of a Mitchell Robinson, a OG Anunoby, a Mikal Bridges, a Deuce McBride. But to your point, the two best players, similar to Sacramento, the two best players, the point guard and the big, leave something to be desired defensively. What I would want to look up is, and shout out to Benji Ritholtz who brought this up on the KFS X and O's podcast on, I believe it was Wednesday or Thursday. The fact that Tom Thibodeau never played 1 second of zone with those two guys is criminal. And I wonder how much zone Mike Brown has played in his career, has run in his coaching career. If he ran any Sacramento at times, not that it should be zone all the time, but the ability to mix in zone here and there so that if you're the team, you're like, okay, instead of knowing that, hey, Karl-Anthony Towns is going to be drop every single time or he's going to be switching every single time, hey, maybe there's some zone that'll be switched in. That'll make their lives easier. So you've actually convinced me a little bit more about the idea of Mike Brown.
Yeah. I'm not, would he be high on my list? No, but I think he's a vet coach that's gotten a bit of a raw deal. I'm glad I could have convinced you a little bit. But he's one, like, I think he's also, just to go a little bit here, he's not in that same class of retreads that you mentioned before, right? Like, I'm with you. I'm out on Mike Budenholzer. No thanks.
Yes.
Frank Vogel is another coach who I actually like, but I think, to your point about defensive coaches being a little bit restrictive, that's something I worry about with him more than I do Mike Brown. See, if you're a defensive coach from the Popovich tree, I'm actually going under the assumption that you're a little bit more malleable and you have more of the adaptability in your coaching because that's what Popovich did. You spoke earlier about how Popovich changed his teams throughout all his different eras. So I can see that from Mike Brown. In terms of some of the other retread coaches that people have brought up, people are going to probably hear some people bring up Monty Williams. I would say no thanks there as well, too.
No, thank you. Respectfully.
Yeah. Mike Malone's one where I'm with you, good coach, but I think he had the problems with the front office. He is Tibbs, like you said, with a toothpick. I don't think that's what the Knicks need right now. But I'm going to go transition to you because you, and for your final coach, you had Terry Stotts.
Yes.
And Terry Stotts I liked because I think he's also in that Dave Joerger class, but probably better than Dave Joerger, I would say, in the fact that you could say he's a retread. He coached some small guards in Portland. I like Terry Stotts here. I really flipped between putting him and Mike Brown. I really had a long thought about it on my list. So I could have had Terry Stotts here. But tell the people, why do you like Terry Stotts? And I got this feeling that you're very high. We're not ranking these guys, but would he be one on your list? I kind of get the feeling that he would be. Would he be number one on your list?
Honestly, it's either him or Johnny Bryant.
Okay.
That are top of my list. And I will probably give the edge to Terry Stotts because he's coached before. Shout out to my good friend Adam Rosenberg, who when I posted some information about Terry Stotts, and he responded. He said, he's just a guy. Like he said that Terry Stotts is a floor raiser, not a ceiling raiser. He just gets eliminated in the first round every year. And him and I had a back and forth, and I was trying to say, like, nah, you have to look a little bit deeper into the numbers. So here's why I'm for Terry Stotts. To Adam's point, you need to raise your ceiling. The way to raise the ceiling of the New York Knicks is to improve the offense. Like, if the defense stays the same, and the offense was better, this team may be playing in the NBA Finals. Terry Stotts was in Portland for 9 seasons. He had a record of 402 and 318. That's a 558 winning percentage. Made the playoffs in 8 of those 9 years. If you look at his 3 best teams, because yes, there are a lot of first round exits in there, but if you look at his 3 best teams in net rating, they were 8th, 6th, and 6th in net rating. That would be 2014, 2015, 2019. Offensively, 2nd, 7th, and 4th. Defensive rating, that's points per 100 possessions, is 16th, 10th, and 16th. Now, you're saying 16th, 10th, and 16th, there's nothing to write home about. But we said all year going into the season, after they made the cat trade, the goal was to have an elite offense and a middle-of-the-pack defense, which mimicked what the 2023 Nuggets did with Nikola Jokic, right? Yes, he had Dame Lillard, who was a top-10 offensive player, but look back at some of those rosters and I don't see I tell everybody who is the playoff series that he should have lost. Like he made the Western Conference Finals 2019. He went up against the KD Warriors and they lost, right? But I bring up and he had to do that with Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum. But I bring that up because clearly he's been successful with small guards. And we know one thing he'll do, he will at the bare minimum, he will maximize the offense. So again, if you just keep the defense where it is, middle of the pack, but if this team is 2nd or 3rd or 1st in offense, this team is viable. Because I believed, and I'm sure, I don't know if you believe the same thing, but so many people I spoke to during the Indiana series was, game 1 aside, you're not going to stop Indiana with the defense and the principles that Tibbs has. The way to beat Indiana, to attack Indiana, is to be better than them offensively. And this team had the capability and the talent to be better offensively. And again, those teams that finished 16th, 10th, and 16th in defensive rating, none of those guys had OG Anunoby or Mikal Bridges or Mitchell Robinson or Deuce McBride or Josh Hart. So I feel as if the defense can be better and the offense can go through the roof. So now the one setback is he is the same age as Tom Thibodeau, so he's a little bit older. But we also know that this front office they don't want to be Leon Rose doesn't want to be a spokesman for this franchise. Neither is Worldwide West or anyone in front office. So the spokesman for the franchise is going to be the head coach, and I have all the confidence in the world that he'll be a great spokesman for the head coach. And I believe he can galvanize the players because he's been successful in this league. Has he won a championship? No. Has he made the finals? No. But again, which one of those Portland teams should he have made the finals with? He just spent a season in Golden State under Steve Kerr, so he's probably learned a few things as well. He is actually the guy that I would want the most.
Wow, I like that. I would not be mad with Terry Stotts at all. I think he made all good points. I think you need to galvanize the offense. I think looking at the Knicks playoff run, the offense was way too laborious. I don't think any of that is sustainable for 4 rounds, and that's why I think that's one of the biggest changes the Knicks need. So Terry Stotts is a name I think should be absolutely brought up as well. Should look at Terry Stotts. He's a good coach. He got a lot out of those teams in Portland. I think a lot of his flaws or the flaws of those teams was more roster construction than it was coaching. So, and listen, they were just in an era where there was a great Warriors team and they had 2 small guards. And you're right, he had that team middle of the pack defensively, and they didn't have, even though the Knicks have their defensive issues, he still has more better defensive players to work with on this Knicks roster than he did there. There's actually better two-way players on this Knicks roster than he had in Portland. All right, so for me, coming off of that, like I said, I only had one retread. The last guy for me is somebody who's coaching right now in the finals as an assistant coach. That is Dave Bliss, the lead assistant for the Thunder. Now, I put him here, and he's sort of a wild card for me. And the reason I say that is what Dave Bliss is known for in his role with the Thunder and what he's done this year is defense. Defense. He is the archetype of that defense. Now, I'm always a little cautious with this, and I know the smart basketball fans out there watching the show are going to say, yeah, Dex, but look at the players they have. And you guys are not wrong. You're not wrong, right? Like, it takes a lot of good defenders to be able to execute and be the archetype of a good defense. But maybe somebody, this is just thinking a little outside the box, if you don't want to focus on offense, maybe somebody who has really good principles and a little bit more innovative, being a younger coach than a Tibbs, but has the defensive principles, might try to mix lineups a little bit better. Maybe try to put Karl-Anthony Towns in situations where he can succeed. Now, some of that is on Cat himself, and he has to execute, but maybe that's possible. And comes from a tree of coaching through the Oklahoma City ranks where they've sort of grown and developed. Now, the thing about him in that role is, and this is why I think you might lean more to a veteran coach like your Terry Stotts, the Knicks really don't have time for that. They're trying to capitalize on a window right now. And so while I think there are things that you could look at with Dave Bliss and say, hey, he's a guy who could be here for now and the future. And I think the Knicks should want to do that, and this is probably why I lean to Johnny Bryant as the favorite out of all my candidates. Dave Bliss is somebody who I think deserves a look just because of what he's done, what OKC has accomplished in the last couple of years, and he's had a major hand in that. I don't know if he's ready for first-time coaching, but he's sort of he was my long shot wild card guy on my list just because of what he's done. Now, I think he may be somebody, if he comes in, let's say the Knicks did hire him, I think he would value maybe getting more two-way players. Maybe he'd want to switch the roster up a little bit. Maybe he wouldn't want to coach a Cat because he looks so lost on defense. That could be a positive for the Knicks, right?
Yeah.
Who they choose a coach might have a lot to do with how the roster looks going forward. But we will see. Look, I think we came up with 5 good candidates. I'm glad I don't have to do this hiring, but because that is a tough process. Before we go, Shawn, before I let you get out of here, I do have to ask you about one other name because you've seen it come up. The Knicks Mark Stein has reported the Knicks have requested permission to speak to Mavs head coach Jason Kidd. What are your thoughts on Kidd? Do you think he'd be a good fit?
So for Kidd, I slightly concerned because it seems like this is to appease Jalen Brunson because he used to coach Jalen Brunson in Dallas. Kidd runs a lot of ran a lot of isolation. Now one could say it's because that was who was coach. You look who he was coaching, Luka Doncic. But I wouldn't hate it. I don't love it. Jason Kidd was also a defensive-minded guy, but I do think he would be someone more. I think he would be more innovative. This would be his 4th coaching stop, so he's had experience. He coached in Brooklyn, he coached in Milwaukee, and obviously in Dallas right now. Like I said, I wouldn't love it, but I wouldn't hate it. There are names that if there's some names you mentioned earlier that you said you're out on, if we hired those guys, I'd be like, absolutely not. But I'm not against it. We'll see what happens. Listen, he was in the finals 2 years ago. And again, he'd have pretty good defensive talent to work with as well as offensive talent. The only thing it would just be absolutely hilarious could you imagine if you're a Mavericks fan and you're watching Luka in LA and then you watch Jalen Brunson and Jason Kidd lifting the Larry O'Brien trophy in New York, as if you didn't hate the Knicks already. I would, the Mavs fans have suffered enough, so I'm going to leave them alone. But yeah, I'm 50-50 on Jason Kidd.
All right. I'm kind of 50-50 on it. Don't think it'll be a terrible hire. I think the thing is, if you're the Knicks, you already have limited assets. Do you want to give the Mavs compensation just to get him? Is that what you really want to do? I hadn't even thought about the aspect of appealing Jalen Brunson, but that's a good point there. They may be looking to do that. One thing I think, to the point you made, the Knicks don't need ISO heavy. They need to get away from ISO heavy offense. They absolutely need to get away from that. I think the front office is aware of that. Look, at the end of the day, I think when you look at this, Shawn, Leon Rose has hired good people around the Knicks for the last couple of years, whether it's Brock Aller with the cap. There's been different moves they've made where they've brought some good people in the front office. So, he's got to trust the process and see what the Knicks do here with their coaching hire. It's going to be very interesting through this offseason. That is Shawn Hardie. Check him out at Knicks Film School. Does a great job with Casual Fridays with our guy Jeff Johnson. Check them out there. Shawn, I know you will have a lot more to talk about through this very busy offseason for the New York Knicks. But I appreciate you joining me on New York Got Game. Thank you, man.
Thank you for having me, and as always, let's go Knicks.
The Liberty, they're off to a historic 8-0 start. Been a lot of good news surrounding the team, but Jonquel Jones just suffered an injury. We're going to see how that goes for them. A lot to talk about the Liberty. Very interesting week. And joining me here in studio on New York Got Game to talk about the Liberty is a good friend of mine, sports reporter Brauna Marks, joining the show for the first time. Brauna, how you doing?
Good. So good to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you. I know you were a big W fan.
I am.
So you had to be here to talk about the W. And look, I've loved the start for the Liberty. They have been so good. 8-0 start, as I mentioned.
Insane.
Best start in franchise history. So I'll ask you this.
Yeah.
When you look at this start that they've never had before in the history of the franchise, what's been the most impressive thing for you about what you've seen from the Liberty?
Yeah, for me, it's the off-season moves. It's the new princess of New York. It's Natasha Cloud. She brings all the energy you need for a championship team that's already really well built, but just needed an extra tweak, with Lainey Hamilton going down and unrivaled. They knew they needed somebody to fill that space, and Tosh is very similar when it comes to that play. She's scrappy, she's defensive. She also, she knows how to score. She knows how to open up people on the floor. So for me, it's Tosh. She's killing it right now.
Yeah, she's had such an impact. And I did this video the other day where I was talking about that with her, right? And how Jonathan Cope, the general manager, went out and got her because he could have said, okay, look, we won the championship last year. We'll just relax a little bit here. But no, especially with Benijah going down, Benijah Hamilton, who Bronner just mentioned, and her stepping up as a defensive presence and just how she's been a leader.
Yeah.
I think that's been impressive, right, with the team, how Tasha's just come in and she's been already such a leader. I've always loved her as a player, but now seeing her impact with the Liberty, it's been huge. I got to ask you about Sabrina Ionescu because on Thursday against the Mystics, she becomes the Liberty's all-time leader in three-pointers. What has impressed you about her evolution as a shooter throughout her game in the W, but then also as a leader? I think we've seen her emerge here with this Liberty team.
Yeah, shoot or shoot. That's Sabrina for you. I think she really took her time in building her confidence on the Liberty, finding her role, coming out of Oregon as one of the top picks, and finding her voice and finding her confidence. You could see that she struggled a little bit in the beginning of her career, but coming off of a 2023 three-point contest win, the NBA calling her up and saying, actually, we want you to compete against Curry. So everybody is recognizing the fact that she is a true shooter and that she has worked really hard to just excel in that role and always be available to her team members as that kind of shooter. And funny that you bring up Sab right after you bring up after I bring up Tosh, is because who fed her for that record three?
It was Natasha Cloud. It was absolutely her.
Exactly.
Leaders like her look for that. So you saw the connectivity there.
Yeah.
Are you on to that point? Maybe you're not because of everything you just said about Tosh. But a follow up to that is, have you liked how they've worked together in the backcourt? Because I think that was a little bit of a question about that.
Yeah.
Okay, how will Sab work together in the backcourt? Have you liked how they've looked together?
Yeah, I think that was honestly a perfect move. Because for me, Sabrina is very much like she's coming off the ball and she's shooting it.
Right.
But Natasha is like, no, I'm bringing it down the court. I'm setting you up. I'm creating the pace. And I feel like that gave Sabrina more confidence to come off screens, to run around the court like Curry does. She's always on the move. And Tosh already knows where she is. And it's kind of like they built that chemistry so quickly. It is super surprising. But I think the front office did a great job in understanding that dynamic would work out for them.
Yeah, they've been a strong backcourt, one of the best in the W right now. Fortunately, we talk about some positives. We're going to talk a little bit of negatives here, and that's Jonquel Jones. She left Thursday's game against the Mystics. She injured her ankle. We still don't know how long it's going to be. There was some imaging. We'll see how long she will be out. How concerned are you about her if she's out for the Liberty for any period of time, and who do you think needs to step up in her absence?
Yeah, I feel like for any Liberty fan, any W fan, like seeing somebody go down and be in pain is just nerve-wracking. It's hard to watch. But thankfully, there was nothing serious that's been reported, hopefully yet. Hopefully they're not keeping any secrets from us. But right now, it's just a minor injury. It's day to day. They're just going to keep an eye on her and just make sure that, she comes back healthy. But for me, I already knew the Liberty had depth. They have Kennedy Burke. They have Isabel Harrison, who they also brought on in the offseason. And as soon as Jonquel went out, they immediately stepped up. Burke hit a 3 with 3 seconds left to pull away in that game. And Harrison came up with like a really big steal and was fouled and got the and one. And, they really pulled away for an 81-71 lead right at the end of that game when Jonquel went out. So it's already like they knew in advance who would step up just in case. And that's the legacy of championship team. And when you speak about Jonquel, you have to speak about Stewie, because it's hard to put two bigs on a court and not have it feel like lopsided or that they're straining for dominance. And I feel like that connectivity on the court speaks also to their bench and how they work together. So they embrace that kind of chemistry and understood that your bigs have to work together, just like your point guards and all your shooters have to work together. It's all the same strengths and dynamics.
Yeah, the front court is strong for the Liberty, and we didn't even mention that you talked about Izzy Harrison, you talked about Kennedy Burke, who even filled in for a game where Jonquel rested last week. Noticeably, who has been dealing with her own injuries, who likely will be back soon. She warmed up the other day, so that's an encouraging sign.
Love to see that
before the game. So hopefully she'll be back soon. We know how valuable she is as a backup big for this team. Now, when you talk about the Liberty and you talk about their undefeated start, Brauna,
yes,
you also have to talk about the Minnesota Lynx.
Do we?
We do. We got to.
I'll give it to her.
Listen, hey, it's what the people want.
Yeah. You're right.
They faced each other in the W Finals last year.
They absolutely did.
The Lynx, folks, they're also undefeated. So this is a tough thing to ask about this, and I was talking about this with somebody yesterday at lunch. But when you look at this team, right, do you think that we're on a collision course headed for another finals matchup? And who do you think is the better team right now, and why? Because these teams look like, even if it's not a finals matchup, they might be on a collision course to go to the Commissioner's Cup undefeated.
Absolutely.
At the beginning of July. July 1st is Commissioner's Cup. Again, they played last year with the Lynx winning.
Yeah.
But there's a legitimate chance both teams could be undefeated heading into the Commissioner's Cup on July 1st. But
absolutely.
Do you think we're going to see, it looks like, part of me feels like, wrap up the W season right now.
Yeah.
Let's get to the finals. Lynx and Liberty, let's just see them play. But if you're looking at these teams right now, who's the better team? Because I think it's a tough question to answer, but I'm going to make you answer.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little bit biased. I'm a New York native, so obviously I feel like the Liberty have a little bit of an edge up. But I also think truly when you look at the team and you look at their energy and you look at the stats and you look at the chemistry, to me, the Lynx they're well built. They're a championship legacy franchise, 4 championships over a span of years. They still have an amazing coach in Cheryl Reeves. So it's like, yes, they're amazing on paper, in play. But for me, it's like, at the end of the day, who is going to play in a way that feels steady? That feels like, no matter the noise or this or that, who's just going to play ball? And for me, that's the Liberty. And I feel like the Lynx kind of shot themselves in the foot last series because they were worried about the refs. They were worried about this and that. And it's just like, sometimes you really have to block out that noise and you just have to play. There are going to be factors against you. People have a home court advantage. Like, there are things that all play into that. And it was close games. I mean, there was like 2, 3, 4 point.
Really close.
They were tight. The competition was there, but it's like, who's leveled enough to make that last 0.0000 seconds count,
Yeah, no, it's going to be the interesting thing, right? So you're giving the edge to the Liberty.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at both these teams, to bring me to my next question, right? Because we saw the intensity of that finals matchup last year. We saw how intense that was, and everybody remembers that Liberty coming out on top. But do you think that both teams have leveled up in a way? Are both teams noticeably better this season, and in what areas do you think both teams have actually improved this season?
Very much connected to my idea of why the Liberty have an edge, because like we just spoke about, the Liberty did make some significant moves in the offseason. They were prepared. They knew that they may have been 97% and they wanted 102% to be ready for this season, because they knew who they had to compete against, not just the Lynx, but the Aces and other teams in the W. So it's not like both teams took into account that they had to tweak it just a little bit, but I think the Liberty won their off season. And a crazy stat is there are actually no champions on the Link roster right now. No champions. But the Liberty already, obviously the whole squad has the one champion together, and then you have Stewie, you have Cloud, who have won championships with other teams.
You think the experience they've had in just winning a championship as a collective sort of separates between the two teams?
And they know what it feels like to lose, to be heartbroken. That last game against the Aces in the previous year. So now they know what it feels like to lose on the home court, and they know what it feels like to win on their home court.
Let me ask you this, because somebody I was talking to about this exact subject, they said to me, well, don't sleep on the Lynx, because the Lynx, they know what it feels like to lose now, losing in 5 at the Barclays Center last year.
True.
Do you think there's anything from the Lynx being motivated this year to beat the Liberty? And they see, both teams are watching, they see the starts that both are off to. Do you think there's any motivation for the Lynx to say, okay, we're hungry this year, we want to knock these guys off? Or do you just value the depth and continuity of the Liberty a little bit more?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I feel like both teams are very strong. It's very much like a 50-50. And, this season, when you think about the W season, you think, oh, it's short. But it's like, no, actually, players are coming from across seas. They played on Unrivaled. So you also have to think about the longevity of the players. So, fingers crossed, nobody goes down. But we're already talking about JJ being hurt. She's recovering from something. You're talking about Nara Sabali. She's also recovering from something and has had previous injuries in the past. I think that is probably going to be the defining factor, not the talent, but the longevity of their talent.
Yeah, got to stay healthy.
Yeah.
And injury luck can be huge in this. Now, look, we've seen some dominant performances from players on the Liberty. Jonquel Jones has doubled in all but one game she's played, counting the game she just got injured in, where she looked like she was on her way to another double-double. But Stewie has been fantastic. You talked about Sab as well, Natasha Cloud. Are there any under-the-radar players with the Liberty this season that you feel really have said they've been part of this process to them being 8-0?
Yeah, I wouldn't say anybody under the radar, because I feel like the Liberty has found a way to make sure that all their players shine in some sort of factor. I will say Sally is definitely my under the radar player. It's kind of ironic because she really showed out in the last championship series, where she was the one to fill the gap when their stars were kind of lacking. And her difference is the major factor when it comes to who is that person who's just going to step up in the spontaneity of the moment and create a big game for herself. I think that's still Savali.
All right, she's the player I think to watch when she comes back, especially if Jonquel is not 100%.
Yeah.
She did step up big time in the playoffs. She was huge for the Liberty. I think last thing for me, let's look ahead to the week, because this week some interesting games. Sky comes to town to play the Liberty at the Barclays Center. Then you get a rematch of your girl Natasha Cloud came up with that big steal against Caitlin Clark. The first time those teams played. Liberty are back out in Naptown. What are you keeping your eye on specifically with the Liberty this week? 2 games as they try to improve to 10-0 at the end of the week. What are you keeping your eye on?
Yeah. I feel like these games are super important because they're also a part of the Commissioner's Cup.
Yep.
So the Liberty already blew out the Sun. Sorry for them. But, they're already on that stride to the foreshadowing of what the Commissioner Cups feel like. Like, you saw the Lynx and the Liberty last season, and then they appeared in the finals, and the Liberty got their lick back, and they won the finals. And, obviously the Lynx were able to raise a Commissioner's Cup trophy. And I do believe that it's kind of going to be that second story. And who knows, it may turn out differently. But I feel like the 2 games ahead versus the Sky, I love to see Angel Reese play. A very big Angel Reese fan. I think the Sky they're still finding their voice. They're still trying to engage their players. And I think that the Liberty are going to take advantage of that. I hope it's a good competition. When it comes to the Fever, you're going into a very hostile environment. A lot of players have already talked about how passionate and aggressive the fans are in Indiana. So I think that would be a good challenge for the Liberty to really step up in one of those environments. But I still think they're going to come out on top. Caitlin Clark is not back yet. It's not promised that she's going to be back during that game. And the Fever are also on that same toll where they're trying to find their dynamic and really hone in all their strengths. So I think the Liberty they're going to go 10-0, sounds like.
All right, 2 wins for the Liberty this week. You heard it from Brauna, said they're going to go 10-0. We'll see what they can do against the Sky and the Fever. Should be an interesting one. Look, this
Yeah.
Liberty team is really good. I did a video last week. I said they are the best sports team in New York right now, hands down, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Sorry for the rest of the fan. Not just they're the best basketball team too.
Oh,
Best
absolutely.
basketball team and best sports team. Everybody, that is Bronner Marks, great sports reporter. Check out her work. Bronner, first time on New York Got Game.
Yeah.
Thank
Hopefully
you.
not the last.
It will definitely not be the last. You will definitely be back here again. I appreciate you coming through.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching New York Got Game.